About ready to begin our keynote address of the day. We still have a seat here in the front. Excellent. There are a few seats over here. Also, there are two. And if I could ask everyone to double check that your cell phones are turned on vibrate as always, that would be excellent. Giuseppe, we're okay? Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Your Excellency, President Mediani, Minister Situjic, Your Excellency Yasser Yakesh, distinguished guests, it really is an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce our keynote speaker of the day, Theodoros Pangalos. Allow me to say a few words about the background of the Deputy Prime Minister of Greece. Mr. Pangalos, by profession, is a lawyer and an economist. He graduated from the University of Athens, majoring in law and economics. In 1973, he was declared Doctor of Economic Sciences at the University of Paris 1, Pantheon, Sorbonne. At the same university, he served as appointed instructor and researcher, as well as director of the Economic Development Institute. He was actively involved in the struggle against the dictatorship, and for this reason, the junta deprived him of his Greek nationality. In 1981, he was elected for the first time member of parliament with the Pan-Hellenic Socialist Party, PASOK, a status which he has held continuously up until this date. He served also as Undersecretary for Commerce, Undersecretary for State of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Transport and Communications, Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as Minister of Culture. He was appointed representative of the Hellenic Parliament at the Council of Europe and the WEU, Western European Union, from 2000 up until this date. He is also a member of the Political Council of PASOK. As we all know, he is currently serving as the Deputy Prime Minister of Greece. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for Mr. Theodoros Pangalos. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Mark very much for his introduction. From this quite complicated curriculum vitae, which of course omits the more shady days and periods, keep in mind that I have been a Minister of Culture and Minister of Foreign Affairs, so I fit well, I think, in your company. In 1981, when PASOK, which was then only 7 years old, won an overwhelming majority and formed the government, I was not in the first composition of the government. I was just a member of the parliament. And the Minister of Culture invited me and said to me, I want to go to England. I don't speak well English. Actually, she was speaking excellent French. I want somebody who speaks very good English and can understand the English. So I choose you. This person was Melina Mercouri. I said, well, Melina, thank you very much. I'm very glad to travel with you to London, but what are we going to do there? She said, we are going to ask for the Parthenon marbles. I was a friend of Melina, so my reaction was very spontaneous. I said, are you crazy? You're going to ask for something that was taken away from the country several centuries ago, when Greece did not exist as a state, by some lord, and since then is a marvelous exhibition in one of the best museums of the world, the British Museum in London. And Melina said yes, because the marbles belong to the Parthenon, and they are not supposed to have them there. Some days after that, we went in London, and as you know, British are very eccentric people. We met several intellectuals and other people that thought this was a very fine lost cause to associate to their lives. So they formed a committee and invited us in a club, and we had lunch together. And they said to us that they want to dedicate the rest of their lives to this cause. Some years ago, I think 2.5 years ago, a document was signed by the majority of the members of the Commons, which is the British Parliament. And this document expressed the wish that the Parthenon marbles be returned to Greece. So there is a majority in the British Parliament today that the Parthenon marbles must be returned to Greece. It's a story that creates many problems. I think creates more problems than it solves. The first question is whether the countries where civilization initiated, Greece, Egypt, Rome, China, maybe, and then areas have been colonized, dominated, lost the control over their culture, heritage, and then allowed these objects to be removed to other countries, whether they have the right to claim the return, that everything goes back to the places where it initially belonged. Can we ask for, and this can be the object of cultural diplomacy then, because that's what is cultural diplomacy. Can we ask for the Bergamo members to go back to Turkey? Bergamo is in Turkey. From the museum which is next to us. Can we ask for the Venus of Milo to leave Paris and go to Milos, which is an island in Greece? Can we ask for the obelisk to leave the Concorde Square and go to someplace near Cairo, where it originally was found by Napoleon, and so on and so forth? I think we can do that. We cannot do that. I think that those cultures, because they were initial, because they were ancient, together with other cultures that came later, contributed to form the contemporary world. So other areas of the globe, and most of all the new countries, United States of America, that did not exist till very recently, have the right to have this heritage, a part of this heritage. What should we approach in a particular way? There are acts that are symbolic. Lord Elgin cutting down pieces of the Parthenon, removing them, after blackmailing and creating false impressions on the local Ottoman authorities, is a case of fraud, is a case where that should not be rewarded in the contemporary world. Of course, contemporary British are not responsible for the acts of a lord of the 18th century, but the act itself should not be rewarded. The sensibility of some people for some of these cultural treasures has to be taken into consideration. And also, I think something that is absolutely necessary, it is that the attention and the care given to such issues should be considered as a paramount argument to where this treasure should be kept. In the framework of this campaign for the Parthenon marbles, I have here a small number of books. I came by plane. I couldn't bring a number of books for all this, but you have them. I think you can put them in your library. A document representing the argument that the marbles have to be reunificated with the use of contemporary methods, computers and all these things. I'm sure you know very well, much better than I can possibly do using your work. And this is the story of the Acropolis Museum. The Acropolis Museum was a very controversial issue in Athens. There were people that said we don't have the money to use. We have social needs, we have groups of the population that have absolutely the necessity to bring forward demands, contemporary demands. We have to look to the future. All these arguments were used. But the great majority of the Greek people, in a strange way, I would say, strongly supported the need for every financing possibility given to the creation of this model museum. As often it happens, those who were with the camp of imagination against the camp of realism were rewarded, because this museum is a very profitable business for the museum itself, for the cultural sector in Greece, and for the country in general. So this museum exists, and its main feature is that it recreates the Parthenon marbles as they initially were, with copies, and you can see the Parthenon as it was before Elgin interfered, Lord Elgin interfered. This is one aspect of the question. Are the societies willing to give the necessary efforts to create the conditions for these treasures to be appreciated in the real value? The second thing, I think, is that, and there comes cultural diplomacy and global governance as well, to remember the title we were discussing yesterday, is we have to fight against the illegality, the illegal business, the criminal business of trading into antiquities. This is not something that is far away or belongs to the past. It's a contemporary issue. Under very strong pressure from the public opinion and international organizations like the UNESCO, like with the help of some governments, not all of them, very important issues are discussed or have been recently solved. I have here a photograph of this statue, which is a very important statue. Hercules tired. Hercules tired has been sold by a German trading firm based in Berlin to the Boston Museum last year. This year, the American authorities were obliged to oblige the Boston Museum to give it back to Turkey, where it came from. These are the Las Encantadas, as they were called in Spanish by the Jewish community of Salonika, who was speaking a language called Ladino, and was some kind of Spanish, because they were coming from Spain. So Las Encantadas is a number of statues that belong to the Hellenistic period, the second year before our era, and were placed in the center of the Salonika, and in a period of the town's history, were found in the courtyard of a big Jewish trader, and that's why they have that Spanish name. So they are in the Louvre. Nobody knows how they went there. Somebody stole them. And the Louvre, of course, refused to give the originals, still refuses to give the originals, but they refused up to last year to also to allow the town of Salonika to make copies. They allowed this year the town of Salonika to make copies of the statues and to put them back where the originals were, after charging 80,000 euros for each copy. This is very cheap, Mr. Sarkozy. I'm disappointed from you. And this is a fabulous statue, the biggest statue of Venus that has ever been found. It is the Venus of Morgantina. It's a giant statue of Venus. It's very strange because Venus was always made in a natural size. And it was also stolen and sold to the Getty Museum of Los Angeles. It is returned to this year. It has been returned to the Museum of Palermo, Sicily, where it was stolen at the liberation of the city from the American army in 1945. So you have cases like this, where the pressure of the international community, the pressure of the civil society organizations, and the pressure of the press can bring positive results. This kind of activity cannot be tolerated, should not be tolerated in the future. The states that have these treasures have the obligation to guard them, but if somebody manages to get away with a stolen cultural good, he should not be able to profit from it, because, you know, there is an impression that has been dominant for years. You had a war, for instance, like the war in Iraq. Everybody has been very, how to say, conscious of the toll of this war in casualties. I saw the Americans live in Iraq, and I heard the speech of the leader of these forces. It was very moving indeed, American casualties. There are the casualties of the people of Iraq, many more. Nobody knows how many they are, but they are still present in our mind. And there is also the casualties of the enormous cultural treasures of this country. Big part, some people estimate no less than 40% of the objects that were guarded in the museums of Baghdad, and especially in were not exposed by just stocked in the museums, have been exported illegally. The first days of the liberation of Iraq, where some people were liberating other people, some people were protecting us from a nuclear danger that maybe existed in this country. We don't know very well today whether it existed or not. And some other people were making business, stealing these cultural treasures and shipping them away to places where they could be sold and put in the hands of people who had enough money to pay for them. So I think this is an object that cultural diplomacy has to make its own. That is the protection of the public, social, and supranational quality of the cultural creation of the past, what we can call cultural heritage. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Pangalos. I think it was very interesting, as well as a very complicated issue, really, where culture can serve very often as a barrier between nations, but as well as a bridge. So what I would suggest, I'm sure as Deputy Prime Minister, there's thousands of possible questions that we could ask. I would suggest the first group of questions and comments could be related specifically to the lecture topic, or let's say cultural diplomacy as a whole, and then maybe we could do a second round of questions for other comments or questions that you might have. I see already a number of hands. If one of my colleagues, maybe Youssef, if you could assist me with that microphone, we can start maybe in the front and then, or there. Okay, that's fine. Either way, they're both ladies, so I can't say ladies first. Here to the right. The other side, right there. Yeah. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Sanela Sinanovic. I'm finishing my Master of International Law and Diplomacy, and I'm also intern here at ICD House. Very warm welcome to our house, and thank you for marvelous representation. I would like to say a comment. Greece is facing the most hard time ever at the moment. When we talk about diplomacy, we talk about the culture and tourism. Greece is a country with marvelous past and diversity of history and art. Greece has also tourism. I would like to ask, when the Greece is actually facing this hard problem that you have, could you, what I would like to hear your opinion. Could you use what you have? And my question is, do you see the possibility in saving your country in tourism, because you have marvelous islands, art, and history like no other country has? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to say you something. Greece is not in such a bad shape. In each country, you have a private sector where the majority of the people work and produce and sell their goods, and you have a state. The Greek crisis is a crisis of the Greek state. The Greek state is bankrupt. For a long period, we had budgets that were not balanced, and these deficits were paid through borrowing in the international market of capital. Then we arrived to the point where we had always these deficits and a very high debt. And people from around the world stopped borrowing to us, stopped lending to us, with rates of interest that we could afford. And this is bankruptcy. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to an individual. It can happen to a private firm. It can happen to a financial, to a cultural institution, to a scientific institution. It can happen to anyone. It happened to the Greek state. It's not without reason. There are reasons, political reasons mainly, social reasons, because we were used to some way of thinking and not another way of thinking. But it's not also a moral issue. It's a political and social issue, and we have to solve it by ourselves. The problem is that after living a period of 20 years where every year was expected to be better than the past one, now we have to live for a period of 20 years where every year is going to be as bad as the existing one. And this is very hard to accept. It's a change of the way of thinking, not simply a change of the way of living, but a change of the way of thinking. Because when a state is bankrupt, then it influences the society. People have to be fired from the public sector. Salaries in the public sector have to be reduced. Taxes have to be increased. So this is the problem we have. You're right to say that tourism is one of the main industries in Greece. And it's responsible for more than 32% of our incomes from abroad. And we are very strongly trying to modernize the sector and creating new fields for activity. For instance, very few people know that Greece is a very cheap and a wonderful country for winter holidays. Usually the idea we have about Greece is sunbathing with a drink on a beach, which is a very good activity. And I wish anyone of you who wish to go this summer to indulge in such an activity. But you can ski in Greece. We have enormous mountains. We have skiing facilities. We have hotels and other places. And also, you can spend your time in a very enjoyable way in the Greek mountains, which are unknown to abroad. They are known to the Greeks, but they are not known abroad. So we have, I think, also regional tourism is very interesting. It's a new kind of tourism. For instance, we have these cruises that develop more and more trips around Eastern Mediterranean. They usually start from Italy. I hope they will be able to use Egypt again, because now we have all these troubles that don't seem to end. But they use certainly the Turkish and the Greek, the Turkish coast and the Greek islands in the framework of the same cruise, which can be, I think, one of the best things one can do in a lifetime. So we have a future there, and we are going to use it. And thank you very much for your question. And if you come to Greece this summer, call me.
think the next question was over there to the left, or? Okay, all right. Since you have the microphone, and then we'll go. You've been waiting. Then right afterwards, we'll bring it here. Okay.
Good evening, Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you very much for your speech. It was very interesting. Regarding the topic of the Elgin marbles, I'm from Britain. I have to say I'm not that familiar with the topic, but I have heard that one of the key reasons in Britain for keeping the marbles where they are is that to move them would actually do more harm than good because they're in a very fragile condition. How would you respond to that?
Yes. First of all, I told you about the House of Commons and the majority that is there. The British Museum is an independent institution. It's, how do you call that, foundation. So it's not something that can be, can take decisions that are dictated by the government or by the parliament in any way. So that's why the British Museum says no, and no it is. The marbles are fragile, but the British, although they're very technically advanced and scientifically advanced people in the world, one of the most advanced people in the world, they have been for several years, dominated the world. That doesn't mean they're equally good in everything they do. For instance, they play very badly backgammon, a game in which I am a champion. But in the marbles, they committed the following mistake. They tried to clean the marbles. And the marble has a skin, epidermida, how we say that? No, the exterior. They have a skin. So if you clean them, you make it vulnerable to climatic and other conditions. And that's what they did. They scratched the marbles with brushes and materials that were supposed to make them clean. And this was, it's not a fatal mistake, but it's a very bad mistake. So for the preservation of the marbles, we get no lessons. By the way, Greeks are champion in two fields. We are better than the British, whether you believe it or not, in the marine, the merchant marine. We own 40% of the world's fleet. Some of the Greek ship owners live in London, but this doesn't make them more British than any other Greek who is living in London. And the second thing we are the champions of the world is archaeology, for obvious reasons. And because we have all this problem with archaeology, because if you are somebody who wants to build a house, you have about 50% chances. When you start to dig for the foundations of your house, you'll find something. It's not always mortal, but it can be very annoying. So I would propose that you become a supporter of the idea of.
Hello, I'm Chelsea from the United States, and I just wanted to address your issue with illegal trade of antiquities. I'm an anthropology and political science major, so I know quite a bit about this, and I've actually written a report on it. So my question is, while illegal trade has several foreign interests, the illegal trade is often due to local citizens and members of poor communities who only have this one livelihood of using this as an illegal trade to sustain their livelihood. So my question is, or I have several, but you only need to answer whichever you prefer. What can we do to combat illegal trade of antiquities when it's the only livelihood some people have to sustain an income? What would you consider the consequences of selling culture for money? Does it devalue culture by putting a price on the priceless cultural heritage? And I'm thinking of several examples, including the Middle East. Are there conflicting interests there, and does that limit the country's involvement in the process of cultural diplomacy when culture is sold to other places? So
Well,
quite a few questions.
It's a very interesting question.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, you are totally right. I mean, somebody who has a shop selling pieces of art in London or in Paris cannot go and find a Greek statue around his house or his shop. He has to have somebody on the spot, and this somebody is very usually somebody who digs in his field and finds an object, and instead of delivering it to the appropriate authorities, where there is always a reward. If you find something, then there is a reward. But of course, selling it to a trader is giving you more money, and I would propose to disregard whether this man has something else to sell for a living or not, because this can be a justification of all the crimes. Somebody who robs you, so might be somebody who doesn't have enough money, somebody who rapes you. I don't want to imagine what can be the justification. We can justify crime like that. And this is a crime, and the Greek legislation, and I am responsible for that in a large part, because I was the minister that introduced the law that is today applied, is one of the strongest in these matters. The punishment of dealing with antiquities and trade goods and artistical goods is, how to say, I don't know how to say that in English, is specific, in idionymo, how to say that? Not peculiar, you know, the criminal system have an hierarchy. Killing somebody is the worst, and then stealing a piece of bread can be, or saying an insult. There has to be an hierarchy. But there are some crimes who are specifically punished, and in Greece, these crimes are specifically punished. It's not an ordinary stealing. So this is true, and this has to be one aspect of the activity. But the problem for what you study here, which is cultural diplomacy, is what happens when this becomes an international matter, which means when somebody keeps that object, keeps that, can be an old book, it can be an old religious, how do you say that, icon. So what happens when this object goes abroad and becomes the reason for international trade? So that it can appear in another state, and somebody in Los Angeles may say, what, this is Egyptian or Turkish or Greek? I don't know anything. I bought it from somebody in San Francisco. So I rightly have it in the United States because I don't know what happened, who brought it there. There has to be, to deal with that issue, you have to have an international agreement between state authorities, and maybe you can have a global governance, which is that some activities and some behaviors cannot be left to the national sovereignty. The basis of which our world is still organized, although we have global corporations and global TV and global networks and internet and all that, still the world is organized in national states. So most of the acts of legislation and the framework with which we are living is a national prerogative. Can you take away some issues and say this is not national and this has to be globalized? I said yes. Yesterday I said yes. I said yes to nuclear activities. I said yes to illness and contamination, climatic dangers. Whether the forest of Brazil is a Brazilian business, this is a question we have to discuss. Because Brazil has, I think, 1/6 of the world's forests. So can the Brazil decide for whatever reason that it's economically good to do so because the government has to increase the wages of the population and create a welfare state? Can Brazil decide to cut down half of its forest? this is another climate on the globe as a whole. So this has to be the concern of a globalized approach. And I think cultural heritage has to be the concern of a globalized approach. Cannot be dealt by each national state on a different basis.
Excellent. Other questions or comments specifically related to the lecture topic or cultural diplomacy? Yes, okay, in the middle. And then we'll take a second round.
Just a small question. Tamara van Kessel from the University of Amsterdam. I was just thinking...
Oh, is it that turned on?
Is it?
You have to hit the button.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
I think it's on. Okay.
Okay.
Tamara van Kessel of the University of Amsterdam. Thank you for your speech. I was just thinking, is it perhaps symptomatic for the decline of our humanist culture that both Greece and Italy are in such a crisis? Could this be a symptom of a much bigger change? Is humanism in culture declining?
The Greece and Italy should not be seen in the way neoclassicism made them look. Neoclassical philosophers and poets and people with wonderful intentions in this town. This is one of the Berlin is one of the acropolis of neoclassicism. They gave to the rest of the world the impression that all the Greek monuments were white marble. The Greek monuments are white marble because the paint has been washed away. They were painted in very violent colors, in pink and blue and gold and green and things like that. They were painted all over. So we're not at all looking like they look today. And in the same way, you should not forget that Athens had a famous leader who is Alcibiades. And Alcibiades, when he, the night before taking the lead of the army to go and conquer Syracuse, that's Sicily, and then the rest of Italy, he had a tumultuous night with his friends, and he went around the town cutting away the Hermes particles. How do you say? You say particles? Yeah. Were small statues with the head of Hermes, and had a sign showing his virility. So these guys were drunk, as contemporary tourists in any Greek beach town with beaches and bars, and they went around and cut away these things. So when he went to Syracuse, immediately came a new boat from Athens. They said, you come back because you have to be judged by the religious court. And this was the destruction of Athens, because the Syracusans called the military leader of Sparta. They won the war against Athens. They killed all the Athenian expeditionary corps. Athens ceased to be a world power and never occupied Sicily in Italy if Alcibiades had not the idea of having a brinch, how do you call that? Drinking brinch?
A drinking bin.
Drinking bin with his fellows. Today maybe the world would be different. Because very strong Greek, South Italy and Sicily would never allow Rome to exist. And nobody knows what the future of the world would be. And speaking about Rome, one doesn't have to. What about Rome? Rome was there, and Nero was singing how nice Rome is burning, and it inspires him for a poet. Everybody has watched the film with Ustinov singing as Nero over the flames of Rome. So I did think Berlusconi is in relation with Nero such a bad personality, after all. So I don't think that we can say that there is a crisis of, I don't know about the Italian society, I can't speak about the Italian society, but I don't think our society is in crisis. I think we have serious problems in some sectors. The public sector is in crisis, the state is in crisis, the relation of the state with the society is in crisis. In some way, what happens in Greece today is like, how to say, the collapse of a system of state control of the society, which is relevant only to what happened in Eastern Europe in 1990. It might sound very, very strange, because Greece is a country with a parliament, liberal elections, free press, and a member of the European Union. But this is very substantial, what I say. The relation was such that the state became bigger and bigger and controlled the whole society and led us to the point we are today. We have to get rid of that. We have to give back power to the people, to the social organizations, and to the market.